Hey, what's up, everybody? Matt Rosenthal. I'm the host of Digging In. Today, you're going to see an amazing show. My guest today is Richard Alman. Richard is a creator. He's a guy that is loaded with ideas. But what you're going to find most interesting about this show is he actually has come up with something that's going to change the world, not just saying it. He talks about it. His company is working on a technology that is going to change how we eat, where we get our water from, how much we pay for electricity. This goes beyond being an entrepreneur. This is about how you take an idea, turn it into action, and actually change the world. So I hope you enjoy this, and I hope you find him as interesting as I did. All right, thank you. Hey everybody, welcome back to Digging In. I'm Matt Rosenthal, and with me today is Richard Alman. I wanted to jump right into it and start by telling you this. He's a businessman, but one of the cool things you're going to hear is he's a disruptor and he's a creator. And what I want to really, really get out of you today, Richard, is how you turn the creativity and all these ideas, and you have so many ideas, into revenue. And I know you're going to tell us some really good stories, but welcome to the show.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity and look forward to going through all the great ideas and how they came up and where we are with them.
I got news for you. Even the background you have, like the colors, and it's everything about you is idea. We just talked for 15 minutes and I'm like, wow, you're just such a creator, and it's not so common, but it also sounds like you're a creator who you actually know how to turn the ideas into businesses, into revenue and job creation, But before we get to that, take me back. Tell me, were you always like this? Did you always have all these ideas as a kid?
You know, I come from a really interesting background that I think helped mold who I am and how I am. Because a lot of people start with a blank canvas, and your environment is going to be a big part of it in many instances. My environment, my dad was a Wharton graduate. He graduated high school at 16, Wharton at 18. My mom also was very active. They started businesses very young. My dad was actually retired his first time at 33. He started businesses and sold them to publicly held companies, and then he got back into businesses. I'm born and raised in Miami. I have three great daughters and one son-in-law. Daughter got married right before COVID started.
Congratulations.
All three girls live in New York, and they've all done very well. My oldest daughter, went to Penn undergrad, Harvard Law. My second daughter went to Emory Goizueta Business School. She's now at Columbia Business School getting her MBA. My youngest daughter just graduated with dual degrees from and she's a fintech consultant for a major company in New York. And my son-in-law also went to Penn, and he's also at Columbia now doing his master's. So education is a big part of it. It doesn't mean it's necessary, but in many ways it can be helpful both in knowledge and in connections. But growing up in Miami, I was around a lot of entrepreneurial people. And my dad ended up getting involved in the automotive business and bought dealerships, and was a partner with a very big automotive operator who's still around here now. And we had dealerships in Pittsburgh. So we spent a lot of time in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was a shock. Growing up in Coral Gables and moving to Pittsburgh was a completely new thing. The place was unusual. It was dark. It was cold. But the people were wonderful. I love them very much. And it really set me up on a lot of social interaction. A lot of people there were also very much of the entrepreneurial style. They were into a lot of businesses, and all these things encouraged me. But my dad with the dealerships, I never got to start at the top. I always worked my way up from the parts department, service department, mechanical, body shop. And I didn't mind that, because to me, I really wanted to understand things, because I always realized that, particularly from my dad and my grandfather, you can't change something till you know how it is.
How it
It's kind of
works.
like, if you walked into a doctor and the doctor hands you a prescription, says, take this. you know, you got the wrong doctor. You want somebody to say what's wrong with you, or are you allergic to something? Are you on any medication? You know, you need to really do your homework before you try to fix something, because you may not fix anything. You might make it worse. So, you know, I learned from some very good teachers who had a lot of patience, because I was probably a little rambunctious and wild as a kid, but you know, not in a bad way. I just, you know, I was like everybody. I wanted to have fun, do things, but I was always into business. When I was in high school in Pittsburgh, I made a deal with my principal that if he would let me out at 12 to go work at my father's companies, then I would promise to get high grades and do everything on time. And if I didn't, you know, he could cancel the deal. So I ended up that not only did I did that and I excelled, but I actually graduated high school a year early. So, you know, but I
No
was
kidding.
always working 6, 7 days a week in the automotive, and I learned. So I also realized degrees are important. If you want respect, self-respect, respect from others, it's important. And I went to a very good school in Pittsburgh, a university called Duquesne University, which is got some very good business accounting schools. All the major accounting firms, the big five, would always hire from there. The law school is top, and so forth. I did later go to HBS, Harvard Business School, in their executive program, where my field of study was disruptive strategy, with Clayton Christensen, who is the founder of the movement. And you know, the whole movement was, how do you change things? And the first thing is how do you recognize what has to be changed? Most people can walk on a beach and look at it and say, wow, what a beautiful beach. Some people can walk on that beach and say, wow, this sand can be turned into microprocessors and chips. And all of a sudden Intel is built. Somebody else can walk along the beach and say, look, there's oysters. Let's go through those oysters. And all of a sudden you can start a pearl raising operation, you know, coconut milk from the coconuts. So it's all depending upon your mind and how you think. So
And your
somebody who just
perspective.
wants to casually walk, life is just wonderful. Somebody who wants to make changes, life is a puzzle you can't go to sleep without fixing. And that's a lot of my personality. I want to make things better.
Wow, that's a lot to go through.
A little bit.
You have such an interesting background. One of the things that I find when I talk to business people, entrepreneurs that are pretty successful, is that they have less of a typical path, right? There's always some trauma, or there's some problems, or there's some things that really cause them to have to be survivors, to have to really like make something happen. And you're fortunate, because it sounds like you had an awesome, I mean, the way you're describing a really awesome opportunity to really do well in school. And obviously you're a very, very smart guy, and your children are very smart people. But what's interesting to me is along the way, and it sounds like maybe it was from your dad, you picked up a work ethic that doesn't always accompany people who do so well in school, right? You can be
Right.
A lot of intellectual people are not necessarily the hardest workers outside of academics. You know what I mean? But you are.
Well, I was the opposite. I didn't like the academics. If I liked the course, I could blow through it and I would be
Yeah.
great. But I knew I was only doing it because I wanted to earn the stripes for
Right.
recognition.
Right.
But I really didn't love it, you know. And everybody said, well, why didn't you go here? Why didn't you go there? Because I wasn't really academically pushing myself. You know, and I'm probably one of those kids that had the undiagnosed learning disability, whether it was ADHD or whatever it was.
Right.
You know, I was given medicine when I was young, which was in the 60s and 70s, because they called it hyperactive. You know, I was always moving, I was always going. But, you know, as an undiagnosed situation, you know, sometimes you don't understand why you can't concentrate on everything as well as you want to, but you figure out how to work around it.
You know, and the idea of people, like the people at that time, and I grew up in the early 70s and probably into the 80s, there was the same idea. If you were a kid who was like hyperactive, something was like not exactly right, but says who? Yeah, that doesn't. It's really just some label that's put on you. But I'm telling you, I have found, and you may have found the same thing, that so many people who have done well in life and in business and who are very creative people tend to have that same characteristic. And I frankly think it's a positive thing, and I think it's like a gift. You know,
Yes.
it really is. And so other people are made uncomfortable because of the high energy. So all of a sudden they want to, give you a medication, but for what? Because you have a lot of energy. It's really interesting how they label that, because they're uncomfortable. And really, your high energy is powerful. Like
Mhm.
that's what's allowed you to do a lot of things.
Well, and it's also attitude. And I tell people, they're like, why you like the way you are? I said, look, I wake up happy. I go to sleep happy. And all day long, people try to change me and I don't let them. And, the other thing I say, I do writing. So I have crazy things that I write and I say, but, I describe my life. My life is a fiesta and I'm the pinata. And I say it in a nice way, because you got to be able to take the knocks. Because if
Right.
you let yourself get negative or get upset or say, well, it's impossible. I work on deals that everybody across the board has said it's never going to happen. You're wasting your time. This is my whole life. And quite honestly, 90% of them, not all of them, 90% of them I've worked out. And when I ended up at the HBS school and this disruptive strategy course with Clayton Christensen, and I spoke with the professors and the other people there, and they're like, tell us about yourself. And I said, well, I'm always pushing against the wind. And they're like, well, what does that mean? I said, because everything I do, everyone says, nobody does it that way. You're doing it the wrong way. You have to change. And I say, this is it. And they said, well, describe some of those instances. And I would kind of like this conversation. And they said, Richard, you're in the right place, because this is where people like you are attracted, because change has never happened from people that keep doing the same thing. People that don't even understand that it needs to be changed. I said, so I finally felt I had a flock, because before I was always flying alone and it gets a little lonely.
That's such an interesting point. And have you found that other people that are creators that's a similar mindset, that they tend to feel lonely sometimes
Absolutely.
because they're
And
not
that's when
understood?
when you read the books of Tesla, you read the books of Einstein, you read the books of Edison, who of course captured a lot of his ideas from others. They'll tell you the same thing. You'll be smarter and more apt to create when you spend more time alone.
In
Because
solitude.
alone time means you're away from any of these negative interferences of people's attitudes or negativity in other ways, and they'll allow you to create without having a hindrance. And I think that was really, really important, because everything I do is new. To me, everything I want to do, I'm not looking at recreating what anyone else is doing. I'm looking at creating what somebody hasn't done and haven't thought of, and then the world saying, wow, this is it. And, I was talking about, the energy project, and people say, well, it goes against physics. It goes against the laws of engineering. Actually, it doesn't. When Newton first discovered gravity, in 1700, you think he really had the technology to assess the full spectrum of what the laws of gravity were? Absolutely not. So he wrote something down on a tablet after he chiseled it, and that was a basis for something. And it's like I tell people, very interesting concept. If 30 years ago, I say, Matt, you got a phone on your desk, you got a phone next to your bed, you got a phone in your kitchen. That's so wrong. I'm going to invent a phone you can put in your pocket and walk anywhere with it. Anyone can call you and you can call anyone. 30 years ago, you would have said, you're out of your mind. It can't be done. However, the people that invented the cellular phone took a lot of technology from disparate uses and they repurposed them together as components that would allow them to build a system called the cellular system. But if you look at it and you understood what people were thinking, it was such an extreme idea. It really was. But that's what makes our society better and smarter. And the only way we're going to keep getting better and smarter is if we don't teach every kid the same thing and say, this is how you do it.
Wow. And and that's so true. And on top of that, that's exactly what the schools are doing. They're teaching the children to all be the same and
right.
Pick my daughter's in the 8th grade. She's going to be going to 9th grade next year. And they already are saying to her, pick a track, what you want to study in school, as if at 13 years old, she has any idea what she wants to do, but they want her to pick something. You know what I tell her? Pick whatever you enjoy doing right now, because at the end of the day, I'm going to show her how to go into business. I'm going to show her how to be a creative thinker. I'm going to show her what she really needs in life, because they don't teach you that in school.
Correct.
But
remember who's doing the teaching? Career educators.
That's right.
And I'm not knocking them, because teachers are important, but very rarely will you see a teacher who's invented something new or different. They are told what books to read. The school board tells them what their curriculum is. So all they are is they're autopilots of education. Again, I'm not knocking them, but you cannot teach somebody something different or how to think differently if you yourself don't understand it.
And not only that, children by nature are creative, and it's the boxes that we put them in that actually clamps down as a governor on that creativity. What you're describing, what I'm really hearing is and so the opposite is, you have children, I have 2 daughters. I'm sure we do something similar. We try to encourage the creativity at every chance we get, because that's what it's all about. I just want to, one other thing you mentioned, which is so true. Have you ever read you're talking about some of those brilliant people and how they like to have time alone? I call it solitude. Mm-hmm. There's a book I read called Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Do you know that book?
I've heard of it. I haven't read it.
It was written back in the 1920s or so, but it was those same people you just mentioned, and he also interviewed them. He also interviewed Henry Ford, mm-hmm. who was U.S. Steel.
Carnegie.
He interviewed Carnegie. He interviewed all these people at that time, and one of the common things that they all shared about their success is that they actually were all friends. They would go into the woods and on retreats for 2 weeks at a time.
Okay. Yes.
And they would have masterminds with them.
Yes. Henry Firestone, all those guys. Yeah. I think on public radio or public television, they did specials on those guys, and they went into it. And to me, that was the most insightful thing, because imagine in those days, your resources were so much less, yet they were able to come up with things. But let me just I'll sidetrack for 1 minute, because, when my kids say to me, and my kids are really smart. My wife also is Wharton graduate. She's very smart. I'm the academically low-hanging fruit, but I have the creativity. But when they say
the bar is set so high, would you say that? That's funny.
So what happens is that they'll tell me somebody is an out-of-the-box thinker, and I say, then they're not. And they're like, what do you mean? I said, if somebody tells me they're an out-of-the-box thinker, I disagree with them, because I never had a box. So I'm not an out-of-the-box thinker. So I never thought of anything being with or without the box. So if somebody says I'm an out-of-the-box thinker, I just think they want to be, but they may not naturally be, or not all the way. You know what I'm saying? It's just a perception thing.
They're turning it into an intellectual, logical thing, but you don't need to talk about it. You just do it. You are.
Right. Exactly.
It's I learned. I heard a few years ago. I was talking with somebody, and this gentleman expressed to me this idea of be, then do, then have. First, you have to be something, and when you are that, you don't think about it. You just be. Then you're doing things, and then you're going to have the outcome. It's another way of looking at the same. You can't think about being an out of the box thinker.
It's got to be in your nature. You
can set aside that creative time, and that was what I was just referring to with those gentlemen that are all long gone now. They all changed the world, but they all intuitively knew that they needed time alone, and they would go in the woods and do it. And it sounds like, actually, do you actually set aside time where you go and you're alone to give yourself time to think?
Yeah, well, I'm alone now because the company that I was a part of, our family business, that was a 40-year-old company. I was the CEO, chief strategist office. officer. I'm sorry. We sold that right around COVID. And so now, we sold the facility, my offices, everything is part of the deal. So now I'm working virtually from home, and all my projects I work at from home. My kids are all in New York. My wife has her own career, so she's not here. So essentially, I'm alone 80% of the day. But what happens is I'll usually sleep from about 1 to 5, and then I'll get up and I'll start writing my notes on my different projects, because my mind, my mind is odd, and that's why I never drank and I never did drugs, because my father, my grandfather had a similar kind of mindset, and they said, don't ever do something that can mess up the tuning in your brain, because you have a very unique way of thinking. You don't want to hinder that also. So I've never had beers, nothing, but I'll wake up at like 2, 3 in the morning with ideas. For instance, on one of my shows I'm creating for television, a different episode or whatever, it just comes to me and I'll just start writing, because you can't really, it's not a 9 to 5 where your brain just happens to do it within the 9 to 5. It's like all the time. And thank God, because really the iPhone with the voice memos and the notes, it's like you can be completely organized, and I have to force myself to be organized because I don't have an organized mind. So I really force myself, but it allows you to do things, because how many times you wake up in the middle of the night, you thought of something, by morning, not only don't you remember what you thought of, you don't even remember you thought of something.
It's so true. And it's awesome to have that iPhone. I do the same thing, but I find so many successful people that are creative do the same thing that you're talking about.
Right.
And it does, you never know when it's gonna come to you. And it's actually, you're fortunate. You have a lot of time alone. And so you, in a way, aren't tainted by a lot of outside thoughts. You have the opportunity to have the solitude and to let these things come to you. Now tell me about some of the things you're working on. Tell me about some of the things you're creating.
Well, I think
what's the most exciting thing?
The most exciting thing right now we're creating is I'm the founding partner, CEO of Pendulum Power and Water, which is a technology that's a renewable energy technology, but it's completely different because we're not utilizing the sun, we're not utilizing the wind. So what we're utilizing is we've created a way to harness gravity, which gravity is equal in force anywhere on the planet Earth, and unlimited anywhere on the planet Earth. And we harness that gravity to basically power a 3-ton pendulum that swings. And as the pendulum is swinging, it's using its motive force to compress ambient air, which means it's in a room. So now this thing can be built in a hurricane-proof bunker, so weather can't affect it. And as we're creating this energy, which can be scaled up to nuclear scale, meaning we can be as big as an FPNL major installation. We also are, as we're compressing the air, the ambient water in the air, the moisture gets squeezed out. So we're able to ratchet that up and do hundreds of millions of gallons of water per unit, which is also filtered in excess of the FDA requirements. So now we can do renewable energy that puts no greenhouse gas into the environment. We actually scrub carbon, so we actually help the environment. We're doing massive amounts of water for agriculture, human consumption. And the third aspect is we have a new level of hydroponics, which utilize our massive amount of energy and water, and we can grow organic fruit and vegetables in every city in the world. With no more growing seasons, no more weather concerns. It's 100% organic. And in all of our output, the water, the energy, and the food bring the prices down to the communities by 30 to 40%, which will not only give people unlimited power, water, and food, but it will give them money in their pocket, which is the only way you can fight inflation.
So everything you just said, there's nothing that was invented. You're taking pre-existing things like gravity, right? You're saying everything like you just described before. You're applying all sorts of technology in a different way to solve tremendous problems.
what
Huge
I call
problem.
the Holy Trinity. 10 years ago, when my wife was listening to this, she said, there's no problem with energy. There's no problem with water. There's no problem with food. I said, Wayne Gretzky was a hockey player, but he taught me a lot with one statement. And they said, how did you become such a great hockey player? He said, I don't go where the puck is. I go where I think it's going to be. And that's what the world is. 10 years ago, there was a possibility of a shortage of all of these three things, but now it's no longer a possibility. It's here. California, the state of California just announced they're curtailing all water except for human consumption and sanitation. That all the cities in California will have to get their own additional water, which, quite honestly, where are they going to get it? Think about this. So we are now in a very odd position because, and I'm going to tell you, I'm apolitical. I'm not Democrat. I'm not Republican. I'm not Jewish. I'm not Christian. We're here to do good for the world, regardless of your country, your religion, your color. However, I do have to say the politicians have done a great job at one thing, kicking the can down the road.
That's right.
Because we knew all of these problems were happening for the past 15 years they've been building. And the governors and the senators and the congressmen and elected officials everywhere said, well, gee, the next guy will deal with it because I'll be out before then. And now we're living with really a very, very difficult situation that we believe, if our technology proves out, which in the next month, we will have built our first test unit, certified it, and then we're going to go globally to provide to every country, every city, the water, the food, and the renewable energy. And if that city can't afford it, if Haiti can't afford it, if Cuba can't afford it, if African cities and states can't afford it, we're private. And the reason we're staying private is shareholders can't say, why did you go and do it for free? We're here for profit. If we see that some cities can't afford it, we're going to give it to them until they can.
Take me through how this went from being an idea to the point now where it's something that's going to generate not just all of the help that you're talking. I mean, this is going to change people's lives, right? In a lot of ways, but you're monetizing something. And so, so many people that are out there that might watch this, maybe don't have this grand of a scale of a project going on, but it doesn't matter what the project is. When you have an idea, to get that idea to become something that you can turn it and you can monetize it, there's a lot of things that happen in between there, and you've done that.
Yes. And again, I'm going to say, I've been a fortunate guy. I didn't pick who my parents were. I didn't pick where I was born. I didn't pick my economic situation I was born into. So I'm fortunate, and I realize that. And being fortuitous means that at some point, hopefully earlier than later, you realize the rest of the world that may not be so fortunate. And there is an obligation, if you're empowered, to help. So how this came to be with the pendulum technology is, quite honestly, through my entertainment. When I was writing for my TV shows, books, and movies, I was in LA quite a bit for a lot of different things. And as I was in LA about 10, 11 years ago, one of the people in the entertainment business said, you're really good at not just entertainment, but you're a business guy. And very few people out here can do both and do them well. And we have somebody that you can meet that can be very important. And I said, in entertainment? They said, no. I said, what is it? They said, well, it's energy, water, and technology for food. And I'm like, I don't know anything about that. They said, yeah, but you understand business and you're credible and you know a lot of the right people, a lot of the right places. So they introduced me to the inventor, who's like my father. He's in his 70s, who's a cross between Edison, Einstein, and Tesla. Very, very smart guy. My wife, who knows everybody from Wharton and Harvard and Yale, knows plenty of smart people. But when she finally spent the week with me in California, she said, wow, you're right. This guy is off the scale. So when I met him, we talked to each other to see what we're built of, what our intent is, and how we can fit together. And long story short, I became the business side. He's the technology side. So the people I brought in were governments. The second largest law firm in the world is representing us. People that were part of Kissinger and Associates, which became McClarty and Associates. I got some of the greatest minds and people that, because of my relationships, were able to look at this thing and say, we want to be a part of it. And we want to help you, because if indeed you can prove this out, you're going to change one thing, everything. And we've been 10 years working on this, and we're now very close to the final stages. Australia has come in. I was funding a lot of this out of my own assets, and you can only go so far.
Right.
The Australians came in and said, look, Australia is basically 70% of the size of the continental US, but their entire country is like California, with forest fires, no water, food issues, everything. So they said, look, we like what you're doing. Can we help you? And if we help you, will you bring it to Australia first? So we said, yeah, not exclusively, but first. So the government of Australia, once we prove this out, hopefully in the next few weeks, will be building us a factory in Perth to start manufacturing these for use in their country. And then from that, we're going to replicate that factory in different parts of the world, because we also have containerized versions. In other words, a 45-foot shipping container that can go on a ship and be sent to Puerto Rico after an earthquake or a tornado or whatever. And one 45-foot container is a megawatt, which can power up about 300 to 400 homes. So, and plus the water and so forth. So to be able to have 45-foot containers for the military, for mining operations, for Indian tribes that we're talking to around the world, including Australia, which has the Aborigine tribes, and the government is tasked with the responsibility of supplying them with diesel generation for electricity, water, food, all the things. And the government is spending massive amounts of money. With our technology, they're thinking we can go right on site and provide them with this. So we have a lot of very, very heavyweight organizations, government bodies, and individuals that are being very helpful. And the moment we finally get this thing done and certified, it's going to be the next 40 years of my life going around the world and bringing this into the reality.
What might stand in the way of this happening?
Well, you've heard of Murphy's Law.
Yeah.
So Mr. Murphy works harder than I do. But I believe in engineering and in common sense, in MacGyverism. Whatever roadblock is put in your way, somebody who's got the right attitude and mindset will figure out a way around it. And, we've had a lot of roadblocks, and to this point, we've been able to circumvent them all, reinvent what we've had to make it work. All of our components have been tested individually. We know when we put them together what they're going to do. And quite honestly, we don't really feel that there's anything except just, hitting roadblocks to work around. But we know the reality is there that this can work. The hard part is it's the dog chasing the milk truck. What do you do when you catch it? So what I'm gearing up for is, when it's ready, how do we gear up to be a company larger than Apple or Microsoft? How do we do that? Well, I know with our technology and our patents and what we're doing, money will not be the problem. But still, money doesn't solve every problem, because you need to build an infrastructure, an organization. And that's my responsibility. But even though what I'm doing is bringing in outside consultants, political engineering and others that can immediately help us to design a company that can do this. And, we have methods and ways to do this. For instance, we're going to partner with some of the largest engineering firms. Fukushima. We know that Fukushima had 30-something odd nuclear plants. One of them obviously had a problem. They checked the others. Why haven't they shut them down? The Japanese public doesn't want them. The Japanese government doesn't want them. The international world doesn't want them. So the question is, why are they still there? And it's a very simple answer. Because a very significant amount of the energy that Japan needs as a country is manufactured by these nuclear facilities. And if you shut them down, they'd be back in the dark ages. So the question is, can our technology, when we finalize it, help them? Absolutely. But can we, as a very small beginning company, handle such large tasks? And the answer is no. So that's why my strategy is to go for the big engineering companies that build cities and build huge nuclear facilities and say, look, guys, we're going to partner with you. You're going to get cost plus or whatever the deal is to be the 800-pound gorilla that has the ability of walking into these governments or these utilities and saying, we're the one that's going to handle the project.
You mentioned FPL a while ago, and for those that don't live in Florida, that's the power company. So what was that?
Yeah, the corporation is called NextEra, I believe.
So
that's their corporate name, but FP&L is what we're used to.
So what's the impact going to be to every one of these power companies out there? Because what you're doing, you're a disruptive strategy. I mean, you're disrupting everything.
Okay. So let's put it this way. A tool can be used for good or bad. The person who's holding that tool decides whether they're going to use it for the good or the bad. What my strategy is that I brought to my group is we don't want to fight the industrial titans because we're not in a position to win that fight. So instead of that, we're going to go to Con Edison of New York. Con Edison has a nuclear facility, I believe it's called Indian Point. Indian Point has been scheduled to shut down, and they keep scheduling shut down, and it hasn't. Why? The huge amount of the state of New York's power is coming from that facility, and they will be like South America. If they shut it down, they're going to have brownouts. So if Con Ed could give them more power, we wouldn't have this problem. So our strategy is to go to the Con Ed of every city, every town, every country and say, look, we will be your partner. We're going to go into this with you. We will sell you our electricity at wholesale. So you can then distribute it to your clients and make a markup that was as good or better than you would if you produced it. And we will have all the economic capital costs on our shoulders. We're going to build the facilities. We're going to run the facilities. We're going to maintain the facilities. So what our objective is not to sell our technology or our equipment, but do what's known as PPAs or power purchase agreements. So a major user or a utility can say, okay, we want you to do this. What's our 30-year price? This is the price. And we can have a CPI index, or we can just say, like I said to the California committee who runs their energy, the Energy Commission in California. They said, well, how can you guarantee us a price? And we're going to do a 30-year deal. They said, well, how can you keep the price the same? I said, well, we have a deal with God. Our natural resource is gravity, and we have an unlimited amount, and we're not getting an increase, and I have it in writing.
That's hilarious.
So, here again, we went to California. We met with the California Energy Commission, and they recognized their problem. They recognized they needed to do something, but they recognized that they started doing it, it would become highly exposed to the public. So what they chose to do is keep it buried. And then many of those people got off the committee, and now it's new people, and nobody knows what to do, but they're shutting down water and power. So getting back to your question,
Mhm.
we don't want to go in as a conflict. We want to go in as a resource. Now, does that mean that things can change down the line? Who knows? We're also working on wireless technology for wireless transmission of electricity, which will allow us to bypass franchises. So you have a box in your house next to your panel, and we put it in there, and you were paying $1,000 a month for FP&L. We say, okay, we're going to send it to you wirelessly. It's going to be $600. You're going to save $400 a month, almost $5,000 a year going into your pocket. Over 10 years, you just save $50,000 without interest. So imagine what we can do by bringing down the cost, because we don't want to go into what the market can bear. We want to go in with what we can bear at the lowest possible price to give people more dollars in their pocket.
You have a patent on this,
Correct.
right?
Yes.
Is there anything similar, or are there any other people out there doing something similar where, I mean, the timing on this is unbelievable because of what's
Correct.
happening around us in every way, which you saw 10 years ago,
Correct.
right? So it's here. Not only that, politically, there is like a push for everything green. And I'm not
Well,
sure
the
what's coming
$1 trillion
down.
infrastructure bill, we're working with Government Relations Group, which is a very high-end group down here. They're tied into all of the major legislation. And what they said to us is, look, this $1 trillion bill has a huge amount in it for everything you're doing, for water, for infrastructure, for energy, for renewable, for carbon cleaning. So they said, you know, and we're apolitical. You don't have to be a Democrat or Republican to like us.
You're just solving the problem everybody has.
We are humans. That's what we
That's right.
are. We're trying to make the human position better.
All right. Well, so you read my mind. That was where I was going with it. I would imagine with what's being put out there now that you guys would be front and center to benefit financially from the money that's being set aside, as many companies are.
Correct. Correct.
Awesome.
And yes,
Awesome.
the answer to your original question is, when we put our patents into the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, there was absolutely nothing that they found that was even 100 miles to clear to what we were doing. So we basically have a pioneer category patent, which a pioneer patent is essentially you've created something and nobody's even dipped their toe in the water before.
As you're talking, you know, we watch back and we look at old interviews of Steve Jobs, you know, and people so early on. I feel like I'm having one of those conversations right now, because we're gonna look. This could be something we look back on, and it sounds like we're going to be looking back on in the near future. It's transformational. Everything's going to change.
Well,
Everything.
The Israelis came to talk to me about this through our law firm, and they came and they're like, what do we need to do to get this? I said, well, you're not going to get it. We're going to bring it to you. And I said, nobody's going to control it but us, but we'll partner with you. And they're like, this can do a lot of good. I said, but there's more good that I have my own ideas. And one of my ideas is that when we're ready, we get Israel going with this technology, and then we make them the emissary to the Arab world. And they can go to all the Arab nations and say, look, we are the ambassador of goodwill for this technology. And we want to get all of the different Arab cities and states to utilize this to give them clean energy, water, food, and all these things, so that Israel will earn its stripes and be able to show the world that they're doing good things. Because again, this is not anything that somebody should look at as well, they're our friend or they're not our friend, or they're Republican or they're not, or religion. This is helping mankind. We either all go down together or we all survive together. But part of my theory was, and these guys basically said it's pretty good theory, is when you get a recruit to strap on a vest that explodes, usually those guys have nothing to look forward to. So when you're going to guarantee them some virgin, some cash for the family, they're not giving up much. But imagine if we go to these other countries and we build these facilities and we hire people at $30, $40 an hour. They have cars, they have apartments, they have retirement funds, their kids can go to universities, they have vacations. And now somebody says, hey, you want to strap on this vest and go blow something up? They're going to say, whoa, you got the wrong guy. I
Right.
got a life. I have something to lose, and I don't want to lose it. Now, are we going to win them all? No. But we're going to cut down a lot of the probabilities, because if we can make massive amounts of people capable of having a life that's enjoyable and meaningful, we can do a lot.
This goes beyond being like a creative guy. I mean, everything you just said is it's unusual, because it's most people don't get a chance to speak to somebody like you who's actually doing what you just said. It's one thing to have the idea, you're doing it, and this could change the world. It's I wasn't expecting that on this phone call, on this
Well,
conversation today.
and there's one other thing that I'm doing that I think might be appropriate to the world. One other thing besides the climate change is a byproduct of climate change, which is global tides. And I'm now having the Patent and Trademark Office a complete white paper on how I can not just control the tides, but we can actually reduce the tides. Because right now there's going to be trillions of dollars lost by insurance companies, taxes, homeowners, property owners, relocating not just US, but worldwide out of coastal areas. I have a technology that I've developed, and my partner, who's a physicist and engineer, has basically agreed with what I want to do. I can't get into the technology now, but essentially we have a way, 1000%, of eliminating and changing the tides to go back to where they belong. So, you know, these are the things that I wake up in the middle of the night thinking about. These are the things. I don't golf.
Wow.
I don't play tennis. I was never a sports guy. You know, this is what I really enjoy. And I believe, you know, I've cheated death 4 times, very strangely. And I
Can you talk
believe,
about that?
well, okay, the most recent one, I went to 2.5 years ago, I went to my daughter's Harvard Law graduation. And I've never had a heart condition. I'm looked at by the doctors. I'm on blood pressure medicine, and so forth. But when we went there for the graduation, it just so happens that my cousin and her husband live in Boston, and he was the inside general counsel for Sheldon Adelson in this family.
Okay.
And they're very connected to all the hospitals because they gave a tremendous amount of money. We had dinner with them the first night. The second day, we were having breakfast, just my family, the girls, the boyfriends, and we started to walk over to the graduation. And as I'm walking to the graduation, I said to my wife, Robin, stop. She said, what? I said, don't ask me. Just do exactly what I'm going to tell you. Call my cousin, tell him I have a cardiac emergency, ask him where to go, and then get me an ambulance to take me there. She said, we're about to go to the Harvard Law graduation. Now, in my mind, I'm thinking to myself, am I nuts? Or am I going to ruin my daughter's biggest day? Do I know what I'm doing? Do I not? I don't know. But my brain told me what was going on. And my wife immediately calls him, finds out where to go. They said, he'll be ready for you. They'll be ready. And she's looking for an ambulance, and I can't even stand. I see a cop. I wave him over. He comes over. My wife says, get us an ambulance. He gets on the radio. It's 2 minutes. So we get to the hospital, and there's...
Wait, tell me real quick, for anybody that may hear this, what were you feeling?
Okay. This is where even the people from Harvard Medical and the hospital said, we get 10,000 cases a year. We never heard of any of this. I said to them,
okay,
I'm going to have a heart attack. Do you have pressure? No. Do you have pain? No. Do you have this? No. What's the matter? My brain is slowing down. They said, we don't know what that means. I said, well, I know what it means. The brain is fueled by oxygen. And if I'm not getting enough oxygen, then my brain's slowing down, which means that I have a cardiac issue. They're like, we never heard of this. So when I get to the hospital, they ask the ambulance guys what's going on. The ambulance guys are saying, we don't know what's going on. He says he's having a heart attack. He's never had a heart condition. He's talking about his brain slowing down in oxygen. We don't know what the hell's going on. So the doctor said, look, I spoke to his cousin. Whatever he says, you do. Treat it like it's a heart attack. Don't ask. So they bring me in. and they start saying, okay, we have to check you for blood clots, we have to check you for strokes, all the things that we check you. So they're checking me there. My wife's there with the kids. She's, what do I do? I said, go to the graduation. My cousins had showed up, and I'll be okay.
Other than that, you felt fine.
I felt fine.
Okay.
So they're going through this whole thing, and they can't find anything. And they're doing a blood enzyme test. They say, you haven't had a heart attack. Right. The blood enzyme test says no. They're doing it every hour. No. They spent 8 hours. They said, we can't find it, but we know something's wrong. So I said, what do we do? They said, we have a new scanner that's this incredible $60,000 scanner. And the problem is the doctor who runs it just went on vacation, but we're calling him back. He'll be back in the morning. And until then, you'll be in Sheldon Adelson's ICU room with the best of care. You'll be fine. I said, okay. So the next morning, the doctor shows up. I said, oh, you must be upset. He said, why? I said, because you canceled he said, you got some good friends. I said, what do you mean? He said, not only did they cancel it, they paid for it, and they're rebooking and paying for my other vacation. So thank you. I said, oh, I figured you'd be upset. He said, no. So they wheel me down and they put me with the iodine, the radioactive, and he explains to me, it's like, you do on any other stress test, you got to keep walking. The more you walk, the more we see the blood flow, whatever, the more is better. Okay. So I get on this machine and I start walking. And 2 minutes later, he says, stop. I said, no, I'm okay. He said, stop. I said, but you said keep going. He said, stop or die. Okay. He said, sit down and shut up. Okay. He said, you're the luckiest guy I've probably ever met. Okay. He said, you were 98% blocked here, 85% blocked there. If you would have stayed in the graduation, you would not have survived. He said, and how you ended up understanding you were going to have a heart attack. We have all the Harvard doctors and all the teachers from Harvard Medical, and everybody's talking about this and nobody understands it. So one last thing, and then I'll kind of get off of this, is they bring in a surgeon. The surgeon says you're going to need stents. He said, but I invented a way to go through the wrist. You don't need the groin. It's easy. I said, I don't want to know. Wake me when it's over. He said, I'm not going to wake you. I said, I'm not going to live. He said, no, you're not going to sleep.
You're going to be awake.
I said, I don't want to. He says, you have to. I said, okay. So, I talked to the doctor, who was a friend of my cousin's, and he invented a lot of these procedures. And he's asking me again about how I knew. He said, Richard, we don't understand this. This is a very weird thing. So I go into the stent procedure. And I'm in the stent procedure. And again, they got a curtain in front of me. There's all these medical people. I don't know what the heck they're doing. But about 15 minutes into it, I said, Doc, you just fixed my major problem. He said, what'd you say? I said, you just fixed my major problem. He said, I don't understand you, but you're exactly right. And I've never had anyone tell me this before. He said, we're going to have a long conversation when you're out of recovery. So when I got out of recovery, he said, look, the first time you knew you were having a heart attack, we couldn't figure it out. But now you knew exactly what I did. I want to understand while it's fresh in your mind what was going on. And I told him, I said, I feel everything. My brain went 600% faster the minute you did it. And then I started explaining to him things that he didn't want to know. And I said, Doc, if I tell you something, will you be upset? He said, what? I said, medicine's wrong. Medical training's wrong. Insurance is wrong. And people are dying that don't need to die. He said, what are you talking about? I said, okay, I'm in great health. I have a little bit of high blood pressure. So I go to the greatest cardiologist in Mount Sinai, and they say, okay, you're going to take this pill and your blood pressure will be controlled. I go through all the stress tests, everything is fine. So I take the pill. Now I realize what's happening. I said, think of it as like a garden hose. So as you kink a garden hose, what happens to the pressure? It goes up. So why was my pressure up? Because my garden hose was getting kinked. So by the time I went to that graduation, my garden hose was so kinked that it couldn't keep me alive. However, the doctors throughout my whole medical treatment were giving me pills, but the pills were covering the symptoms. They weren't going to the problem.
The root
So I
cause.
said, people are dropping dead. They're going to say, you had a sudden heart attack. It wasn't sudden. They knew for 6-8 years this was going to happen. They could have prevented it. He said, well, how do we prevent it? I said, the test you just gave me where you found it, you don't do that at the end. You do that at the beginning. And he's like, well, this is a complete reversal of medical treatment. I said, yeah, but isn't the objective of medical treatment to keep people living as long as they can? He said, absolutely.
Yeah, that's a great question. I'm not sure it's so true for when you tie it back to the money, if that's in everybody's best interest.
I said, so think about this. And I thought about that
because it's in the company's best interest, I mean, not as individuals.
No. I hear you. But I said, look, people like me have two kinds of insurance, health insurance and life insurance. So I said, so if the health insurance people hide the problem and save money, who ends up paying? But the life insurance many, many, many more times. So
right.
These insurance companies are all part of a association that some of them even sell both kinds of insurance. So if they actually got together and said, wait a minute, the bottom line is we're killing ourselves by letting our patients die. Let's figure this out.
Do you have you thought of the fact that this came to you and you felt something and I mean, it wasn't something physical that you felt, but you had your brain told you, so you felt something, and you even said that you're heightened, you pick up on things.
Well, okay, so that was
in a way that's where ideas come from. It could be a spiritual, not a religious thing, but it could be a spiritual conversation.
Okay, so you're absolutely right. Throughout this time, when I was going to my doctors, and the doctors said, you're good shape. I said, but doc, I'm tired. My mind is not as sharp. I used to remember back to when I was 2 years old. I could remember stuff about people that they're like, how do you remember that? I mean, I was really good with memory and thinking. And I would say to them, but doc, I'm not being able to do that anymore. And they would say to me the same thing. Welcome to age. As you get older, you're not as sharp. And you're still sharper than most, so be happy. And I, the fool, believed it. So what happened was, the minute they put the major stent in me, my brain went about 600% faster, and my sharp thinking was crystallized again. And I'm an odd person. There's something that's not normal with me. And I don't understand what it is, but I'm trying to do the best I can with it.
You said it was 4 times. That was one.
Okay.
You said there were 4 times you cheated death.
Yeah, I mean, there was one time when I was in a hotel room and an armed robber came in to rob me and do harm. And it didn't turn out so well for him.
Okay.
So by the time we were done, he was in jail and I was unharmed. And he wanted to press charges for me for assaulting him in my own hotel room. So it was and that was in Philadelphia, city of brotherly love.
Right, right.
Wow. But there were
a crazy story.
Yeah.
You don't have to go any further. I don't want to. But the first story you just told about the heart. It's I mean, it's almost like, what do you say to that? Like, I'm listening to this, I'm like amazed. But I believe everything you're saying is possible, because I know that I believe that your brain is like an antenna, and you are picking up things. I mean, everything is around us, and you can pick up things. You feel nature. You feel. Sometimes you can feel what other people are feeling just by being around them. Like, you can pick up on it. It's vibrations,
But the other thing is, other people can pick up on me.
Right.
See, it's not a unilateral system. It's a bilateral system.
That's right.
And the reason I say that's important is a lot of times my wife will say, when I go and I meet somebody new and I'll start telling them about something, she's like, why do you tell people you don't know about it? And the answer is almost everything that's ever happened to me has come from meeting somebody new, mentioning something, and building some sort of bond and a partnership. So like it's worked for me. And part of it is not just whether I have an idea or can help their idea, but I firmly believe that people want to be involved with somebody. That the two things that I always say, you got to meet these as a minimum. You have to have very high ethics and you have to be very highly reliable. And that's just my main two. If you don't have those, you're great. I don't have time for you in my world because my world is too cluttered and I need to do what I can do. But I think people pick up on my attributes also. So not only do I bring in the signal, but somehow or another, I give out a signal that is positive to others that can pick it up.
I'm seeing it the whole entire conversation. I can feel it through the video, the whole conversation. It's interesting, even the way your expressions, your tonality in your voice. Yeah, it's really interesting. It really is. I could actually talk to you for a while, but we have to we have to bring this to an end.
Okay.
You're such an interesting guy, man. Holy wow.
But part of what I do also, and why I do this with you, I can't do everything on my own.
Yeah.
I can't accomplish it. Teams are great, partnerships, strategic alliances. So the reason I'm telling you and kind of opening my playbook is because you never know. Somebody who might watch this at some point in time can say, hey, I'd like to talk to him. And I'm available. I'm on Facebook. I'm on LinkedIn. I don't hide. I'm in plain sight, and I'll talk to anybody who has an idea or a question or something they may want to do, because that's how you make things happen.
That is the perfect way to end the show. I'm gonna stop. We're gonna stop right there, but I want to just quickly, like, I was taking notes while you were talking. Sorry if you heard me typing in the background, but some of the critical things that you talked about throughout this conversation, relationships, education, and ideas, like those three things, even those three things combined, are like, it's a unique way that you put them. I have a lot of people on the show. I talk to a lot of people. You've put it in a unique way: relationships, education, ideas, and talking about that time alone to think. Really, really powerful. And what you just said, reliability and teamwork and writing down ideas. Doesn't matter. You got to be like in tune with, it doesn't matter when, where, how, whatever. You got to write these ideas down. They come to you from wherever they come to you from. And they go just as fast as they came in. So It's so important to write them down. Anybody that watches this, if you can piece together, and I'll try and do it in the description when we put this video out, the idea how ideas go from being an idea, if you're a creator, to how you can monetize them, but more importantly, how you can take them and turn them into things that actually help other people. That's what you're doing. And everybody says they're doing it. Frankly, you're the first person I think I've met in my life who's actually doing it in a way where you could actually change the world. Like, I'm blown away by talking to you.
Well, I put it down to my partner, and I kind of do things in kind of funny ways. So I said to him, look at Microsoft and Bill Gates and all these really smart, capable, proven people and their organizations and their philanthropies, Richard Branson, Gates, all these guys. And I said, all these giant, powerful organizations promise to deliver all this good, right? I said, we're not. He said, we're not? I said, no, we're not going to promise to deliver this. We're just going to deliver it.
You're just going to do it.
I said, that's going to be the difference for us. And I said, I won't stop. And I mean, I told my wife, if this works and I got to go set up the factory in Australia, I'll go live in, I've been there 3 times and it was beautiful. I'll go there and I'll set it up, because that's my part of the responsibility, is the logistics and setting it up and making that a model for the factories we put elsewhere. But I said, till the day I'm dead, I think it's going to be my happy objective to go around the world bringing this to communities so they no longer have problems with access to clean water, food, power, and build their infrastructure. We can build economic engines in each of these towns and cities that can employ people and create. I mean, that's what's going to make this world continue to exist in a good way. And I know you're out of time, but I really believe it.
It's so true. You know, you're the reason, everything you're saying and your energy and what you just brought to this today. First of all, I want to thank you. The reason that I do this show, is to inspire people, to motivate people. And you've done that. There's no way anybody can watch this today and not be inspired and motivated by you. It's just not possible. Anybody that has an idea, follow it through, take action, follow it through. The other thing that the way that I end these shows is I always say this: be humble, hustle, and do the work. And everything you talked about is that you're a very humble guy, you're a hard worker, and you're just doing the work. As you just said, you're just doing it. So thank you for coming on.
I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the opportunity.